And welcome back, and a good day to all, and especially welcome back to the channel. Well, as you can see, we are once again back inside the cab of our 2016 2500. You'll have to forgive my voice. I will try to speak up as much as I can. Currently still in the process of getting over the latest round of cruds circulating the area. But I've got some of my strength back and felt like getting something done today. And as you can see in front of us, we got a big box of Banks parts. I commented on a previous video that our existing 3-pod cluster you see there, and which took the place of the old factory handle here, is what we originally put in probably about 3.5 years ago when we supercharged this particular truck, and we're monitoring boost pressure, fuel pressure, as well as battery voltage, with it being a 3-pod setup. And when we put the red Ram together, as you can see right here, we ended up going with a Banks style system because it gave us access to the pedal monster, as well as being an iDash to control it. And because we had the iDash, we could order various sensors in conjunction with a 4-channel analog kit that would then also plug into the iDash, allowing us to use 1 gauge to monitor all those activities that those 3 gauges are doing now. Plus, this will give us the ability to also run the pedal monster, which after using it on our project truck here, our other project trucks, our Candy Apple, has helped tremendously with getting rid of what is perceived to be like a pedal lag. And even more so, it's kind of was on this one, or still is on this one, but even more so because remember, we put a high stall torque converter in here, as well as a 2.5 stage high lift cam in it with the supercharger. So it actually helped. Pedal monster does quite a bit. I think we're running level 6 or level 7 city on this one, and it helps take a lot of what is to be perceived lag because of the high stall torque converter and all the other modifications kind of out of the picture. Yes, I know what you mean, that you could just press down on the throttle a bit more and achieve the same effect, but it kind of gets rid of that for you. It gets it to where you can just kind of get in and give it what you perceive to be normal pedal pressure. It will then compensate based on your settings and turn it into more of a normal pedal feel, more of a throttle cable type driven pedal feel, if that makes sense. So that's a little bit of a long story there, but in a nutshell, yes, we are going to deinstall that gauge pod, that 3-pillar gauge pod. We're going to put our factory handle back in, and we are going to install this. And I saw this on their website. It'll be a little bit of a new product now available for this particular vintage of Rams. It is the as you can see here, the iDash pod, is what they consider their stealth pod. And what this is going to do is, rather than the one that you see in the yellow and the red one, which is a good one as well, also put out by Banks, where it would just kind of all encompass and sit here at the bottom and hold on to the pod or the gauge, this pod, and you'll see it when we get to it, is just going to mount in through here, just a lot more lower profile, and just kind of stick out underneath here. So it'll look more of kind of like a freestanding pod that doesn't cover up as much of this pillar trim as the one in the red Ram does. Again, not that there's anything wrong with the one that run in the red Ram. This is just kind of an updated, I guess you could call it, version of that. And like I said, when we get this mounted, you'll see the difference. The other thing I like about this one, I think this one was about $10 more, but as you can see, it comes with all the hardware, to include even a free step bit for drilling the hole that we're going to need to drill into this piece in order to run our wiring through. And yes, about 3.5 years ago, when we put that gauge pod in, I actually did remember to save our factory trim piece and just threw it behind the back seat for future use. And that future use is going to be today. So what we're going to do is start to get everything unboxed here. But just to kind of reiterate what we're going with is that this is the Banks iDash itself. This is the main gauge that will be inside the cab, mounted inside of our stealth pod you just saw a few moments earlier. Just like in our red Ram, we're going with two 100 PSIA sensors. Now they've got PSIA and PSIG depending on what the application is and what you're monitoring. The reason why I'm going with PSIA instead of PSIG, even though we're monitoring boost and fuel pressure, is that per the instruction booklet that's normally inside of the 4-channel analog kit, it makes a comment about the PSIA and the PSIG sensors, and it specifically states for sensors that might see vacuum or do see vacuum to use PSIA. So PSIA will be using for the boost because it's also going to see manifold vacuum, not just boost pressure. So in order to use the kind of the sensors to basically just be the same, I ordered two of the same sensor just so I wasn't dealing with one being an A and one being a G. And again, I think you could probably use PSIG even in the application we're going to use and be fine. Again, I'm just getting this one because the book explicitly said, you know, A for anything that might see vacuum. Now we got our bracket kit that we've used before. Well, don't worry, we'll be going all over all this as we get to it, which will be used to help mount our analog, 4-channel analog. And of course, we got our pedal monster, which is, again, like I said, does an awesome job of really transforming the way that pedal feels. And of course, we've got our needed B-bus starter kit. Now this is the cable that will connect between the analog module and the pedal monster itself, and then the pedal monster will go, the cable will go from the pedal monster into the iDash. But again, you'll see all that when we get to it. Now the other thing I wanted to make a comment on, and I'll show you this a little bit later in the video, is that I don't think this is a temporary thing, whether it was intentional or not, but I've used this now for the last couple of months, and I've even made a comment on some other individuals' videos who also do Banks videos. Banks seems to have kind of a rolling 10% off code, and if you go to their website, for example, and you grab, let's say you're looking at the iDash, for example, and you've got the web page up for the iDash or any of their other parts. If you take the mouse and copy the SKU number and then right click it like you're going to copy the part number, up normally will pop up a dialog box saying, hey, you know, copy this code below and you can get 10% off. And it's a code being generated by the website. So it's not a plugin or anything being generated by the browser. It is being generated by the website. And I'm assuming they kind of did that as an Easter egg / if you're copying the part number, it's more than likely a mechanism to kind of give you a 10% off to kind of keep you on their site to buy their products, which I would always buy Banks products through the main Banks website anyway. That's just me. But being able to get a kind of a sneaky 10% off code, so to speak, and that we wouldn't really consider it sneaky. You just kind of have to know the secret knock, I guess, and that would be at least what I have found. Once again, is if you're on Banks's website, highlight the part number and then right click with the mouse and select the copy function, and then normally it'll pop up and say, hey, here's a code you can copy and use for 10% off at checkout. So, like I said, give it a try. Worst case scenario, Banks see this video and they change the code or take the 10% off, but for now it at least it still works. And it like I said, I've noticed it's been out there and kind of working since at least last year when I've been buying Banks parts. Anyway, free little Easter egg there for you. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to work on getting, let's see, gonna have to work on getting that pod out of there, and all the residual wiring. All the wiring just exits the firewall through a little plate that would normally be there for an old school clutch pedal, which obviously this truck doesn't have. And then we're going to use that same method, just like we did on the Red Ram, to run our wiring back in. So what I'm going to work on is getting that pod cluster out of there, and then I'll show you all that once we get that torn down and taken apart. We're also going to be, if I can pull it off, and I'll bring it back to you, obviously, and show you all this step by step. So maybe a little bit of a long video, but if we can get it to work, I'm going to show you how I'm going to handle the OBD connection into banks. You can plug directly into the OBD on this particular truck. You can also get the Y splitters, but we've got access to something that's relatively close underneath that kick panel, and if there's some spare slots in it, then we're going to use the device from Z Automotive in order to give us a dedicated OBD port for our Banks products. So let me get to work on that, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we've just removed our lower kick plate, and you see me do this several times before. It's just 2 Phillips screws at the bottom corners, and the rest, it just snaps, it pulls forward, and we just released our clips for our OBD2 connector, just so it's not kind of, you know, holding by the wires, the weight of that lower panel. So I'm just in the process of disconnecting some switched ignition power from our old gauge pod. And if you remember, when we put the center console in, where we grabbed that was that there was an old power port that came out when this didn't have a center console in it. They had an adapter that came down to here, and it came out of the trim in front. Now this center console, if you remember, gets its power and its ports from a connector underneath the driver's seat. So it left some unused sources of constant 12 and ignition switch 12 volt dangling there. So we just kind of tapped into that just as a temporary measure, ran it out here through a fuse, and then eventually it'll snake its way up to the gauge pod, and it became our switched 12 volts. Now you can see we got the gauge pod just kind of removed. It just holds itself up with the replacement screw they give you in the pod. But to show you the back of this, and it's wired together like any standard pod would be, is that each pod has its power source, and each pod is wired out into the engine compartment into its appropriate sensor, except for the power, battery voltage. It just gets wired into power, obviously, but you've got your pressure sensor there, or pressure gauge there for fuel that we're using for fuel, and of course you've got the AEM gauge down there we're using for boost, and it's just wired in accordingly. Now these gauges, the top 2 are from Max Tow. Again, nothing wrong with the gauges. They work fine. They worked well for years. They still work to this day, and they work quite well. The particular power backplane that Max Tow gives you, you can get this little jumper wire when you hook your power, ground, switched, and constant 12 volt up. They can give you this jumper harness that'll actually tie and clip all 3 gauges in together, so it gives you a really nice wiring job behind everything. But again, this is what we're looking to replace. We're going to go from 3 separate gauges down to 1 single gauge that will not only give us the ability, again, to control the pedal monster, but also give us the ability to run diagnostics, data logging, you know, the whole 9 yards. So we're just in the process of getting our old wiring removed. And what I had used in the past, and I got it from Amazon, was just some of this 4 conductor wire, which came inside of a sleeve, just a kind of a white vinyl jacket that we then put this loom wrap around when we ran it. Now, what I wanted to comment on earlier was I made a comment where we're going to create an OBD2 port specifically for our Banks gear. And if you're familiar with Rams and you're familiar with fourth generation Rams, you know exactly what you're looking at in the shot. You see a star bus, a Starlink connector there, or a bus connector there, and another star connector and a bus connector there, both a green and a white side. Now that's where the Z Automotive piece I commented on earlier is going to come into play. Z Automotive makes what they can call a double bypass kit for Chrysler vehicles of this vintage. Now, normally the double bypass would be used if you want to add an OBD2 port that bypasses the central security gateway that are in new model Chrysler vehicles. And real quickly, what that gateway is, it was a security method that was implemented that doesn't allow you to gain read-write functionality through the OBD2 port. So the double bypass kit plugs into these star connectors, and we do have an open slot on each side, which is good. We're going to plug a green connector in, a white connector in, and then give it power. And what that's going to do is give us the ability to run directly into the bus, or I should say into the two sides of the bus. Now, and what that would do on newer Chryslers that have that security gateway, it allows you to bypass that. So that way you would get an OBD2 port, once I get some light down here, such as that one, but it would have read-write functionality. And that is needed for a lot of third-party products like the Z Automotive Taser and things of that nature to be able to make changes to the vehicle unauthenticated. Because if you plug into a newer Chrysler vehicle with a scan tool that has into a port that has a secure gateway, and you're using an unapproved or unauthenticated device, what would happen is you only have read-only control of the vehicle, and it doesn't work quite well with a lot of aftermarket type readers and other components. Now, in this vehicle, we don't necessarily have to worry about that because of our age. We're 2016. We don't have the security gateway. So we could just plug any device we wanted into this OBD2 port, one that we currently have, and be able to get read-write functionality of the vehicle without an issue. However, since I have a spare kit, we're going to go ahead and use it. That way it keeps me from having to put a Y splitter on this or having to keep from disconnecting it every time I want to take it in for service, things of that nature. That way it can just stay connected, kind of stay tucked up into the dash, and it leaves this free for service personnel to be able to plug their tool in, to be able to do their checks and stuff on the vehicle prior to service appointments, things of that nature. So yeah, we're going to take a little bit of extra step, but again, just to reiterate, you don't have to do what we're doing here as far as how we're going to tie into this. You can get a Y splitter. There's other methods for doing it, but since we have those star connectors in such easy access, and we have the a spare double bypass kit to use, again, we're just going to create a dedicated port for the Banks items. So I'm going to continue working on getting the old wire loom out of here, getting the old gauge pods and wiring out of here, get everything pulled out through the engine compartment, and just basically start prepping to get all of our new wiring in place. So let me get some more wiring deinstalled and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, as you can see, just in the process of pulling out our old sensor cabling. Still need to remove our old sensors. This was the sensor for our manifold slash boost pressure. Next to it, you can see it has an extension, has a sensor relocation kit on it, the stainless steel one. That was for our fuel pressure. And both areas we need to tap into with our new sensors are right over here on the passenger side of this particular engine, this particular setup. You can see we use the same kind of adapter that we used in our 2012. This is the Nitrous Express fitting for this particular Chrysler fuel rail, and it just gives you 2 ports, one on either side. We're just going to take this stainless steel relocation kit off and plug this or screw the sensor directly into the adapter. And then this little nylon piece of tubing that you see in this manifold here, this is where we're going to tap in and replace this and just put our sensor directly here for our manifold / boost pressure. We originally put a relocation kit on this years ago because the sensor that we were using to monitor fuel pressure didn't come with that long of a cable. It wasn't long enough to have the sensor here and go all the way inside the cab versus the Banks ones, which give you significantly more cable. And then what we're going to do, like I said, is just put the sensor directly here and get rid of this relocation line, because we know we got enough slack in the sensor wiring to do it. Because that kind of brings us to our next question, which is locating the 4-channel analog, which is the analog module here that we're going to use at least 2 of the connectors for. Originally, just like we did in our 2012, we're going to have 1 sensor that'll be doing boost, 1 sensor that'll be doing fuel rail pressure, and eventually we'll come back behind ourselves and we'll put a sensor in the transmission pan. And then when we get a good differential cover, hopefully, Banks, if you're listening, please make differential covers for other makes and models of heavy duty trucks as well as light duty. I need one for the 2012 1500 and also need one for this 2016 2500. They do list the 2500 on their website, but unfortunately it's all the diesel variants. This is a gas variant, as you can see. But besides that, again, we're going to be using two channels to begin with, and just looking for a spot to mount this. Now, this is the mounting bracket you saw earlier. Sorry, yes, I did have to enlarge the hole a little bit for the mounting screw. I do apologize for that. And this is the sensor itself. And I think what we're going to do, based on the available space in this engine compartment, we're just going to reutilize an existing bolt hole. And what you see here is that this was the lower bracket for the factory air box that used to sit here before we added the supercharger. So we got a nice little spot kind of right here, and what's going to happen is that the analog sensor is going to sit probably right about in here. Should give us enough room to get our connector in the bottom of it for sensor wiring. We'll have the pigtail coming out for the bus, as well as our terminator, which will go up front. Now, we may have to get an extension cable for our B-bus cable here that you see here. I have one inside the house, so it's kind of no harm, no foul. We have plenty of wiring. We'll be able to get to our 2 sensors that we have to plug in, again, both boost as well as fuel. We just may have to extend it to get it the rest of the way inside the cab. So that's what I'm going to focus on currently, is just getting the rest of these old sensors out of here and the wiring, and getting our 4-channel analog module mounted. So let me continue to work on that, and I'll bring you back. And yes, I understand the bolt we took out that we're just going to kind of reutilize here for convenience goes right there. It's a bit overkill as far as the size of the bolt, but again, it keeps us from having to drill into the vehicle or tap into it to create another hole. So I'm going to get this mounted, get some sensors pulled, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, as you can see, we've got our 4-channel analog module mounted in the location. Last you saw, we were putting the bracket on so that it's now in place. We've got our terminator locked in. We've got our B-bus extension cable. I did end up going out of rating my parts bin, and we did buy a B-bus extension cable. This is a separate piece for our 2012 Red Ram. Ended up not needing it, but I think we're going to need it here just because of the length of area that we have to go, which is still all the way across over to the driver's side, and then eventually through the firewall to get to the pedal monster. And this is the cable that'll go eventually into the pedal monster. This is the B-bus starter cable, starter kit cable you saw me earlier. You notice the differences there. You got that in that would normally go into the 4-channel analog, and you got this square pinned 6-pin end on here. That is 6 pins, yes. That would then go, in our case, will go into the pedal monster. Now, this extension cable, however, just has a male and female end on it like that, and this will go on to the starter cable, and then eventually, like we said, the starter cable will make its way inside the cab. Now, this terminator, you'll see we don't have another module, so we've just got this terminator on this side. But you can see we got our lines matched up here, so we're locked in. We got our lines matched up here, so we're locked in before we hit the lock levers. Now, we did kick this 4-channel analog out a little bit, just so that the very, very bottom of this wasn't rubbing against this tray. And for full disclosure, maybe you can see that there. Let me get you some light. You can see that bottom pin we actually cut off just to give this sensor a bit more clearance, versus it's still over here, but no harm, no foul. That pin isn't used. Like I said, this whole assembly here was for a factory air box that is no longer here and will no longer be installed. So I have no quorums kind of trimming that a little bit. We also trimmed it, as you can see here, cut a little notch out of this side to make clearance for our B-bus cable. Again, we could completely remove this piece, but I don't really want to do that because this piece also bolts into the, or I should say the passenger wheel well liner bolts into this piece, so this kind of acts as a brace for this liner. So don't really want to move that as of yet. So what we're going to do, and also you'll notice that we've got our remaining old boost sensor and fuel rail sensor out of here along with wiring, and we have our new bank sensors installed. Now remember, these are 0 to 100 PSIA, and yes, a little bit of overkill to go with 0 with 100, because this truck will never see 100 PSI boost pressure. It's just never going to happen, but it's the same cost. And I've had some issues in the past with the 0 to 15 PSIA sensors, which I'm still waiting for an answer for banks on. I know the 0 to 100 will work because that's what we used on the red one. And again, it's overkill. It'll never see that level of pressure, but since it goes from 0 to 100, it'll work fine for what we need. So we got our new sensor in to monitor our vacuum / boost, and you can see on our fuel rail adapter here, we've got our new, again, 0 to 100 for our fuel rail pressure. And of course, in typical 4-channel analog fashion, you can see they give you a monstrous amount of wiring to reach all your sensors. I think that's about 6 or 6.5 foot of cabling. So we got more than enough to get to the 2 sensors we're going to be using right away. And of course, the other 2 sensors will come from a transmission oil pan temp sensor, as well as a differential cover temp sensor once we get to those pieces. And Mr. Banks, or Banks in general company, if you happen to be listening to this, not that I think anybody from corporate levels listening to my little channel, but if you are, please make the rear diff covers for the gas variant of the heavy duty trucks, as well as the Ram 1500. If I said that in the previous clip, I'll say it again. I have no shame. I admit that. I really would like to see some diff covers for our other versions of trucks, including the light duties. I think the market is there. I think you would sell quite a bit of them. They just need to be available. Anyway, with all of that being said, like I said, this is in place where it kind of needs to sit. We got our sensors in place. Now it's just a matter of kind of getting our wiring situated and getting our B-bus cable over to the driver's side there, so we can kind of poke it through the firewall and then continue the inside items. So with that said, I am going to Again, hook up channels A and B to start. Now, to be fair and full disclaimer, when I went to put this bottom connector into this 4-channel, it wasn't kind of seating right. So I took the connector off, and I found a pin on here that was actually not quite seated into this module all the way. So I kind of pushed the pin in place. It looked like it kind of maybe got a little messed up in the factory, and then the connector seated. So we may or may not have a dead channel in here. We shall see. Anyway, we're going to start and use channels A and B. I think A will make for our fuel rail pressure. B is going to end up being our boost pressure. And then we'll go from there. Let me see. I think I should strike that. I think we'll make A is going to be our boost pressure and B our fuel rail. Let's see. Yeah, A boost, B fuel, and then C and D eventually, like I said, will go either transmission fluid temp or differential temp. But let me get some wiring started here, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, we spent a little bit of extra time wire looming and fabric taping up a lot of our cable that goes across, which is our B-bus data cable, and our 2 unused channels 3 and 4, which again, as we covered earlier, will be used later. You don't have to necessarily wire loom this. It does come all wrapped in that nice braided nylon material, but I figured we were here, we had the extra time, we have the material, might as well wrap it, give it a little extra protection. So you can see we kind of have the main trunk of all 4. It splits off, and there's our 2 feeds coming down around. Again, one plugs into the sensor for the fuel, the other one will plug in the sensor for manifold and boost. Got every kind of, again, just loomed and taped and tie wrapped all the way across. And to show you the other side here, we got our protective caps on our 2 unused channels for now, and then we have the 1 B-bus data cable coming off, which is going through the hole in the firewall. So the nice thing is, this pretty much completes the install that's underneath the hood. So you can see we went from having the sensor modules, which were mounted against the firewall. The fuel had a relocation sensor kit on it, which was the stainless steel line. So we've gotten rid of all that. And we've gotten rid of the nylon tubing that used to run to the vacuum/boost sensor. So now all of that is nothing more than just electrical signals. The sensors are plugged directly into fuel rail and into the manifold block. So all it is now is just an electrical signal that goes into the 4-channel analog, out of the 4-channel analog, and it just comes down to now a single, what was it, 4-pin connector? 4 or 6-pin connector. Actually, I can show you here because we haven't finished running it on the inside of the cab yet. Yes, quite a bit of wire here. Yeah, what is that? 6-pin. So a 6-pin connector for a B-bus. So that's kind of what we ended up with. So we does a very, very nice job of kind of consolidating all of that into one nice, neat, manageable looking area. So we're going to get that rerun through the firewall, and then I'll bring you back and we'll start prepping the inside pieces. Again, we got a pedal monster, as well as the iDash and the stealth pod to put in. So I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. We're just in the process of getting our pillar trim prepped here. We removed the little tab or little plastic trim piece that would normally cover up the bolt hole down towards the bottom end of our trim, because that's where our stealth pod is going to sit, and they did a very nice job. It's nice and keyed and sits in there flush. And you can, let me get you some shop light in here. Let me set your tripod down, get you zoomed in here so you can get a better shot of this, hopefully. There we go. You can see that area down in there. That's where the screw is going to go, is in front of it. But you see that nice big area behind it, that grayish area coming through. That's what you're going to mark with a Sharpie. and then drill with the provided step bit. There's our step bit here. You just need to be mindful, you know, how big or how big a hole you need to make based on the number of cabling. Now we're going to have two cables that run into there. One is the OBD connection or OBD2 connection, and the other one is going to go down to the pedal monster. And even if you go to the full size of that step bit that you can see, this pod will cover it. So more than likely what I'm gonna do is probably come all the way down to, I would say, the number 18 on here, and just kind of max it out, so to speak, because it will cover it, and that should give more than enough room to get both of our cabling through that we need. So again, we're just gonna place it on the trim like that, mark it with a Sharpie right where it needs to be drilled, and drill from there. So let me get a hole drilled in this and I'll bring you back. One moment. Sorry, just want to show that to you. So hopefully you can see that Sharpie mark. That's kind of about where it ended up. So I'm going to start to drill from there. So one moment. And welcome back. I got a hole drilled. See that down in there? Let me just take the pod off. It's kind of what we ended up with. And again, the pod is big enough where even if you go to the max size of the step bit like we did, you're going to cover that up. Plus you're going to be left with, you know, plenty of room, you can see there, to run your wiring through. Now the nice thing about this, oh sorry, didn't mean to knock you. The nice thing about this kit is that it's a very nice step bit. You got a nice step bit you could use for other stuff in the future. So not a bad deal for the cost, if you ask me. So we're gonna pack you up here on the outside and join you back on the inside driver. One moment. And welcome back. As you can see, we're just in the process of getting our pedal monster set up. You're getting everything out of the box. Same process as you saw me do on the 2012, but just to show you here, we're going to undo this electrical connector you see here at the top of the pedal, and it will Y in to that. So the pedal monster will then plug into the gas pedal, and the factory harness will then plug into the Y, the other side of the pedal monster harness, which is the Y that you see here. Now remember, we've got the 4-channel analog, which is an additional part of this setup. So what will happen is the cable that you see here that comes from that 4-channel analog will plug into here, and the cable that goes from here will then plug in the iDash. Now it doesn't matter which one you plug these into per their instructions. So the 4-channel analog can go there or there, and the iDash can either go there or there. So it's just kind of down to personal preference, where you can best get it to fit. So we're going to get that installed onto our pedal, and then we're going to find a nice, safe, secure spot to kind of stash that box, or someplace to attach that box to. Last time we kind of put the pedal monster up here because the 2012, the trailer brake controller was here in this area, versus on the newer models it's on the center console, as you can see right here. But we do still kind of have this cavernous area back here that we may just be able to kind of just shove it up in there in that little corner like we did last time, provided that we've got enough slack in the cable to do so. Pedals are a little bit further apart in this one than they were in the 2012, but like I said, we'll get in there and we'll give it a shot. So again, it's not too difficult of an install that you see here. We're unplugging the factory, and this will plug into the pedal, or one side of this will plug into the pedal. The other side of this, which is more than likely this one, which will be plugging into the factory connector, and then we'll find a place to put that. So let me work on that and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. You can see we're getting our pedal monster wired in. We've got our two connections made to it. Again, the one connection goes to the 4-channel analog out under the hood, and the other connection is going to come up here and plug into the iDash. So we're just getting our OBD connection, which will be our second connection to our iDash, squared away. And at the beginning of the video, and I may come back and revisit this a bit later, if you remember, we've got our two star connectors there, and we've got a couple open ports. Well, Automotive makes this double bypass kit, which what I was going to do was going to use this to give the Banks iDash its own dedicated OBD port, you know, to include power as well as being able to access the bus of the vehicle. And I'm going to hold on that for the time being and just use the factory OBD port for the time being. Not that I think it wouldn't work. I'm sure it would work fine, but just more of a concern on my side. One of the safety features of the pedal monster is that it pulls power from the OBD port and not the accelerator circuit. So this is going to be using a little bit of power, and the iDash is going to be using a little bit of power. Now this kit from Automotive comes with a 5-amp fuse tap. And what I'm doing is just getting things ready to, I got a 5-amp fuse tap there, and I've also got a smaller 4-amp fuse tap here kind of ready to go. The one thing reason why I'm holding off is, and I'm sure it would probably work fine, it was just a little bit too thin to give me the warm fuzzy, was that the positive wire on this double bypass is relatively thin, and I'm sure it'll handle the full 5 amps. So the fuse that comes in its kit, it's just again a little bit thin for my liking. I may order another one of their kits and see if that's been made any thicker or not. You can kind of see, you probably won't see it very much in the camera, but the thickness, I would say, of what's that positive line coming in the OBD port is about double the thickness than what we've got going on here. Again, it's not a dig on this. I used this kit before. I've never used this kit with a pedal monster and an iDash. This was going to be the first time, and I'm sure this wire will handle the full rated current of the fuse that comes inside the box. Again, this is a fuse tap that comes with a 5-amp fuse. Again, it was just a little bit thin on for my comfort level. So again, we're just going to use the straight up factory OBD, and again, I'll look into this and I'll come back and revisit this probably at a later, definitely at a later point, and if I can find again a little bit thicker power wire there, just to kind of make my warm and fuzzy a little bit more warm and fuzzier, then we'll come back and revisit this. But for now, we're just going to use the factory one. So with that being said, we definitely got enough room that we can kind of shove the pedal monster up into here and just kind of secure it. I'm going to fish this wire up from the bottom so we can get our second connection to our iDash, and then we'll look at getting our actual iDash in here and getting our pillar trim back in. So let me get some more wiring fed through and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we're just getting our trim back in place, and if you remember, we drilled a hole in it earlier. We got our pod and of course our 2 cables that'll connect to our iDash through it. We do have our Allen bolt started, which is included in the kit. If you remember from earlier, I even give you the Allen key to tighten it with. Just have to kind of get it started. It's not too bad to get it going. You can see it right there, kind of at the top corner of the screen. We got enough in there to at least a couple threads in there, at least enough to hold it until we can get all of our cabling situated. Then we'll kind of come back and tighten it. We need to put our top bolt back in, and that'll be awesome. So for the first time in probably 3.5 years, it's got its nice factory grab handle back in, which I'll be honest with you, having a heavy-duty truck up on as tall a tire as it is, even with the side steps, it's nice to be able to have a grab handle back on this side of the truck again. The other nice thing about these Banks cables, you could see that they're nice and flat. They're like kind of like ribbon cables. Makes for a very nice job to be able to kind of just fold them together, zip tie them, be able to stuff the excess back off into kind of this. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back here in this little cavernous area where the pedal monster itself is going to sit. So let me go ahead and what I'm going to do is get this finished up and just leave ourselves a little bit of slack hanging out here. I'm going to get this bolt tight, get this upper bolt here refixed, and then I'll bring you back and we'll get the gauge and everything plugged in and go from there. So one moment. And welcome back. So you can kind of see what we're left here on our iDash part of this install. You can see the back of it there. Let me get you a shop light. It's hard for me to tell being outside filming this how well the camera sees this or not. But you can see we've got a 6-pin connector and a 4-pin connector. Here we go right here, 6-pin and a 4-pin. Again, one of these is going down to the pedal monster. Pedal monster then goes to the 4-channel analog, and the other one is coming up off the OBD2. So we've gotten this Allen bolt again, which is supplied with the stealth pod mount. Bolt tightened up. We got our top bolt tightened up, and we're just in the process. You can see we got our pedal monster kind of pushed into this cavernous area here. We did find a nice little kind of spot just to rest it on the inside, which keeps it out of the way of any of the pedals. For the pedal monster cable, you can see it right here running along this bus wiring. Usually what I like to do with these, and I find it works pretty well, at least on these Dodges, is to go over the steering column, because we don't have telescopic steering. We don't have an up-down steering wheel, and this is the just a channel that it runs in. This part doesn't rotate, so it usually works out pretty well to go over and around it, and you can see that we come out over on top of our brake light switch and then plugs into our gas pedal that you can see here. So that does a nice job of kind of keeping everything up, keeping out of the way your feet, pedals, things of that nature. So I'm going to get this plugged into its 2 connectors here. Then we'll get it seated in the pod, kind of turn it to where we need it, and then we will go from there. Now, if I'm not mistaken, even on the install video I saw on this, there is a ring for putting this inside of other type gauge mounts, and 2 nylon screws that you can thread down on these shafts here to help secure this. But I believe the fitment is tight enough, and you can kind of see some raised ridges like this one right here that'll do a fairly decent job of holding on the edge of this, but it'll also kind of allow us to clock this where we need it. I guess a short way of saying it is that we can get in there, we can turn it where we need it, and it doesn't look like, due to the nice tight fitment, that we necessarily need that lock ring on the back of this. So we're going to install it without it, and I'll bring you right back. One moment. Figured I'd show this to you. Those connectors go up. The lock tabs face straight up on both of them. So you can see we've got them in here, and then we're just slowly kind of giving a little bit of tension, pulling back on our wiring to get rid of the slack as we push this bezel in. Now you got a little bit of space back here. That amount of slack you see there should be fine. And then we can just kind of take the iDash, kind of put it in place, and then we'll wait until we're actually sitting in the vehicle and get a better shot directly on it, and then we'll finish kind of putting it in place and getting it where we need it. But what we can do now that we know that we don't really have that much more slack to pull through on our pillar is that we'll just kind of get this bound up with a tie wrap, and then we'll go from there. We need to take that up, probably take up a little bit of slack on what we'll plug in our OBD2 port, and take a look at how much slack we got in the engine bay. Basically, I'm going to clean up some wiring here, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So, haven't buttoned up all the trim yet, but I just want to make sure that things are working okay before we do that. I did cycle the key quite a few times since we put a new pressure sensor on the fuel rail. Just want to make sure that it got nice and pressurized, and we weren't seeing any leaks, which we're not, which is a good thing. So I've got the cable plugged in at this point. We should be able to see if we can get things started here. There we go. It's not receiving an RPM signal from the from the engine, so it's going to get a little mad at me for doing this. But what we can do is we're going to set up our leaders first. It needs to know what type of engine it's speaking to. So we have a 6.4 liter in this bad boy. Good deal. So we got that. Make sure that we save it. And good. So we're seeing that. We're seeing battery voltage. I've had the battery on charger most of the day today just because we had the doors and everything else open. What I'm also going to do is come into, and I believe it's under settings, and then engine settings, layout city, vehicle selection. I'm going to change the vehicle selection from standard to, and there should be a, that's all Duramax Rams. That is a basically diesel version of Rams. Toyota, Hyundai, Nissan, Jeep, normal Jeep / Ram, because remember we have the gas version of a 2500. So I'm going to select that one, and it's going to switch over and then reboot itself. And my understanding is what that will do is set itself up with some specific parameters that are unique to the type of vehicle that we just selected. So you can see that we are talking to the bus because we're seeing ECT is 70 degrees, so that would be our temperature sensor. Let's see. Let's back up one and see if we are seeing our module. So if we go back down, come into Banks modules, and we see the 4-channel analog. Awesome. Now that we're in 4-channel analog, let me just see if I can get you in here closer. I don't want to calibrate the pedal monster just yet, but we need to do that. The good news is it does see them both. So channel 1A, what we're going to do is say enabled. It is seeing voltage on that channel, so that's good. Channel's enabled, type is voltage. Yep, calibration, raw, offset. What I'm looking for is channel 1, channel B. Oh, we're not getting a signal off channel B. Ooh, did I plug that connector back in? Channel C, no signal, and channel D, no signal. So that pin problem that we had may be our channel B. Hold on, let me go take a look at one thing, make sure that sensor is fully seated. One moment. And welcome back. Well, problem was on my end, and you probably saw it on the screen and were screaming at me the whole time. And I do apologize. Am I going to edit it out? No, because we're all human. We all make mistakes. Mistake was on my part, and I'll show you where. We are receiving data off both A and B channels. So if we come back down into Banks modules, 4-channel analog, that was A. Remember, we see it enabled, we set to voltage, and we are getting a value back. If we go down to B, you can see we are getting a voltage. It is enabled. If you remember, if you go back at the previous screen, and I'll show you what it looked like, and I didn't catch it, you notice it's disabled by default. You have to go through and down arrow and enable these. So just because it sees data on a particular channel, it doesn't look like it automatically enables it for you. So that was the issue. I had to arrow down and enable that particular channel. So we're good to go. No issues there. Nothing wrong with anything. And channel enable, type voltage. Okay, so now what we're going to do now is go back. We're going to select, change the type from voltage. So if you saw me do that, and I'm going to change this over to pressure, PSIA, because we have PSIA sensors. And I want to change the range now. You notice we have a range option because they're 100 PSIA sensors. So that one is now set. I'm not going to worry about an offset at this point. Come down to channel B. We're going to do that again. We're going to hit type voltage. we're going to change that to PSIA. And then now that we have a range, come again, once again, and change our range to 100. So you can see we're reading just 14.07 PSIA in channel B. In channel A, you're reading 67.57. Now these are PSIA sensors, so you have to subtract, I think it is 14.9. You have to account for atmospheric value, and that'll give you a PSIG result. And the reason why this one's higher, remember, that's reading our fuel rail pressure. This one is just reading, or what will be, our manifold vacuum and or boost, so it's reading just atmospheric at this point, which is normal. So now, if we come down to, once again, we're going to back up. We're going to back up again. So this was the default menu. So if we over arrow, come back down to Banks modules, we're going to calibrate the pedal monster. So you see it says calibration incomplete. So if we over arrow, proceed to calibration, yes. Depress gas pedal completely, okay. It's going to look a little funky. That flashing, okay. Release gas pedal completely. Depress gas pedal completely again. And release completely again. And there you go. Boom. So we are now calibrated. So what we can do, just to show you this real quick, if we come into gauge selection, I'm sorry, what I want is gauge layout. Gauge layout, sorry, I was down one too low. Gauge layout, if we scroll all the way down here at the bottom, there'll be a pedal monster combo, which is the one I like. We can select that, and now you see you've got your pedal monster, statistics here on the side. And if we up arrow, you can see we went from stock to city. And if we keep going with the up arrow, you'll see we'll go from city to sport and then track. And usually what I like to do now, I'm just going to return it to stock in this truck until we can get some drive time on it, is that you can also come in here and edit these gauges here on the side to read a different value, which I will come in and do, but I won't bore you on that particular video, but just to show you where that's at. If we arrow over and come into gauge selection, now that we've got the gauge we want, you can see that we've got those three fields we can edit. If we select one, let's say RPM, actually instead of speed, let's go to speed. Instead of speed, if we go into, I think it's under group in our case, just to show you a quick one. 4-channel module. And again, if we select A, see, now it sets the PSIA. And now if we go back, you'll see we're reading the value off that sensor. Now remember, it's PSIA, so we kind of have to do a little bit of math there to get what PSIG would be. Now, I haven't tried it yet, but you can map this value and specifically call it out as being like fuel rail pressure. It may calculate that for you and give you a PSIG reading, but I haven't tried it yet. But again, that's just kind of the down and dirty. I have to go through and set the colors and do the, you know, the sensitivity, light, calibration, and all that fun stuff. But what I'm going to do at this point, just so I'm not boring you with all this, but you can see that, and again, it went to sleep because I don't have the engine running, so it's not receiving an RPM signal from the bus. But you can see that we're working. We're up and running. It sees the data monster. I'm sorry, it sees the pedal monster. It also sees the 4-channel analog adapter that we put in the hood. We're not getting a fuel leak. We're getting signals from both our pressure sensors, which is awesome. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to bring you back, and then I want to show you how I found the little 10% off pop-up that's on the bank's website. And I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So as promised, I just wanted to show you this to you. So I'm on Banks's website, and we're looking at the selections for the 2016 2500 we were just working on. And for example, if I do something like maybe go into it works with all of their SKUs. Let me tell you what, let me just do it this way. again, if we just pick something and go into sensors, let's say, and if I elect to, let's say, learn more on their OBD2 splitter, once it loads that page, if I click with the mouse and highlight the SKU number, watch what happens when I right click and copy it. Boom. You get a limited time offer where it gives you a coupon code that you can slap into the shopping cart upon exiting and get 10% off the entire order. And like I said, I don't think this is an accident. I do believe this is intentional. I've just noticed that it's done this on their website, at least as far as I can remember, as far back as last year when I started buying a lot of Banks products. I just haven't seen anybody really mention it. So I figured I'd mention it. We'll find out whether they contact me or not, I guess, after this. But other than that, like I said, the install, as you saw, is pretty much done. We are now fully converted over to Banks with the iDash, the 4-channel data logger. We've got all of our sensors replaced. It helped us clean up our wiring quite a bit. You can saw that we went from a 3-gauge pod down to just a single-gauge stealth pod. So everything looks cleaner, looks meaner. I still need to go through the iDash and, you know, configure screen colors, brightness settings, gauge maps, layouts, things of that nature. That's all customization type stuff. But hopefully this video was helpful. If you have not subscribed already, please consider doing so. If you have already subscribed, I do thank you immensely. And with that being said, we're not quite done. We got quite a bit more items lined up. I'll just give you a little bit of a teaser there. Won't tell you exactly what, but we got some more items lined up for you. And with that being said, I will let you go, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.